Welcome to the inaugural Ohio State Michigan podcast, videocast, and really happy to be here. And I'm here with my friend Matt, who is the token Buckeye fan, and I am definitely the token Michigan fan. But really happy to start this videocast. It's our inaugural videocast. So Matt, how you feeling?
I want some mushrooms.
No inside jokes. No inside jokes. But
I'm feeling all right. My team is looking like we're going to make the playoffs, and doesn't look like there's any other good teams this year except for Georgia. So, we just got to be able to beat one team.
Sounds like you're pretty confident. So,
Well, it's not just confidence. It's more. I think it's more that because it's not just complete confidence, because our defense is still sort of untested, and I think our linebackers are pretty trash. But I still think that there's any elite teams this year. Even Georgia, I don't think it's truly elite. I think they're elite on defense, and I think they're good on offense, but not elite. But they're still probably the favorite at this point.
And so throughout this, I think maybe we'll touch on just kind of how we believe our teams are doing this far in the season, because, obviously we're halfway through, so we have pretty good ideas of what our teams look like right now. Then we'll focus on maybe the quarterback situation, because, Michigan and Ohio State both have some unique quarterback issues right now. As far as quarterback starting is pretty good. Don't really want to bench them, but we've got some talented guys on the bench. What's going to happen with them, and then we'll kind of go into what's happening this weekend, because Michigan and Ohio State both have pretty big games. So definitely stay tuned for that. It should be interesting. So let's just jump right in. So you kind of gave an overview of how you think Ohio State's doing. Have you even looked at Michigan at all? I know you know what's going on with Ohio State, but have you watched Michigan enough to feel like you have kind of an opinion on them at all?
Yeah, your quarterback makes my eyes hurt. Cade McNamara kind of reminds me. He makes me it's sort of like I'm going to compare him to like Brady Hoke. He's like that guy that's not very good, but I don't want him to lose too much, because then he'll get fired. So I'm hoping that Cade can do just enough that he holds on to that job a little bit longer, because I am concerned that their backup quarterback might be good enough to get them to the promised land.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, talking about those guys, I mean, Cade is he's very steady. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed in the past few years, especially with Harbaugh, his quarterbacks, you look at them and they don't ever get better from year to year. And he usually has a different quarterback every year. No one actually improves. I think Cade is probably as unspectacular as he is. He's probably the most consistent, competent quarterback I'd say Michigan has had. I don't know, last year, in that disastrous year, they played Rutgers. I don't know if you remember hearing about that game at all, but halfway through the season, Joe Milton was completely ineffective and terrible. Had an awesome arm. He threw the ball awesome, but he just couldn't connect on any of those passes. He just couldn't hit wide receivers.
Wasn't he in the run for the Heisman in September?
Yeah. After the first game, they beat Minnesota, and it was like Heisman time. But he completely lost it. And against Rutgers was ahead 17-0 at Rutgers. And they pulled Joe Milton eventually, because he threw like his fourth interception. And they put Cade in the game, and literally in maybe 2 to 3 plays, he threw a long touchdown pass, like a beautiful, perfectly thrown touchdown pass. And then he went on to score, I think, 5 touchdowns total in 2.3 quarters in overtime. He had like 4 touchdowns passing and 1 rushing, and won the game for them. And at that time, I was like, oh my gosh, they have a competent quarterback that can complete passes, and he's super accurate. But
against Rutgers,
granted, you have to look at what Joe Milton was doing at that time, 17-0, with the awesome arm. But I thought at least at that point, maybe he's not going to be great, but he's competent, and he has been competent. But take a guess. How many touchdown passes has Cade McNamara thrown this year through 7 games?
This year?
Mhm.
5.
Yes, exactly. He threw 5. He scored 5 touchdowns just against Rutgers in a second half. But this year, through 7 games, he only has 5 touchdowns. Like, so it just by knowing that, do you think that's Cade's fault or do you think that's coaching's fault?
Well, I was going to say, first of all, I don't know if I'm going to ding him that much since you guys run the ball 80% of the time anyway. So I don't really care how many touchdowns he has. I'd be more concerned with like what his yards per play are. And I'm guessing it's not too good because, yeah. So, I mean, that's the thing. So he just needs to be able to make big plays, not necessarily touchdowns. I just don't think that Michigan has that right now. And, you know, I think they need to do what Oklahoma did and make the switch. You just need to, you know, I'm still like, you know, kind of a side note, but I can't believe that Caleb Williams is getting so much hype for pulling out a crazy win against Kansas of all teams. Like, that's just absurd.
Yeah, I was in the Great Wolf Lodge with my kids and at the bar there watching that game, and I was highly offended by watching that game. But it was while the Northwestern game was happening, and speaking of JJ McCarthy, I mean, that guy's got all the tools, but he's super young. Everyone, if you look around, you watch other videos, you read articles, everyone wants that guy in. He's the backup quarterback. He's probably going to be awesome.
Is he a true
better than
freshman?
Cade. He's an absolute true freshman. You know, but he didn't win the job. Maybe they'll put him in at some point if Cade falters. But one thing, and looking at his recruiting record, he went to IMG Academy last year, and you know, which is an awesome powerhouse high school, and completed 58% of his passes. So that scares me a little bit. Like Cade McNamara he's got the record in Nevada, the state record in Nevada for I think for yards. He's like 11,000 or 12,000 yards he threw for. Cade McNamara, the guy who's got 5 touchdowns right now through 7 games. So I'm just a little scared about all the optimism around throwing that true freshman kid in when you've got a guy that you haven't even, it seems like they haven't even tapped Cade's potential at all based on the Rutgers game. But
So what kind of quarterback is he though? Is he a drop back or is he a dual threat?
he isn't really a dual threat. He's more of like, you could, if he left, and I don't think Michigan's going to have both quarterbacks next year. If he left, he would probably go somewhere where they have an air raid and light it up. Like I guarantee if he's got the Nevada state record passing, he would probably go somewhere and light it up. So I think you probably can understand, like you probably guessed that my thought is it's probably a lot of the coaching and the plays they're calling that's really hurting Cade right now. So that's kind of where I'm at a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, part of it too is your top receiver is out for the year, so that doesn't help things either.
No,
But
doesn't help at all. But
doesn't
back to Ohio,
excuse everything.
let's go back to Ohio State though, because there's a really interesting quarterback situation happening there. I mean, Stroud was a little bit shaky coming out the gate this year, but he's really come on. So what are your thoughts about him, how he's played, and what does that mean exactly for the 5-star backups on your roster right now? And do you think they'll be there?
So first, to get a baseline, let's define some terms. So shaky is how you described him. So how many yards does your quarterback generally get in a game?
About 80, 90. He's averaging about like 125 or something like that.
So his shaky game against Oregon, he had like 450 yards.
Yeah, very true.
That was a shaky game. Now he did make a few mistakes and there was a few drops, and you know, Henderson didn't really play that much in that game, unfortunately. He hadn't taken over the full-time role yet. But it seemed like we couldn't quite break off as many of the big runs in that game as we normally would. But as far as quarterbacks go, CJ looks to be as good as any quarterback I've ever seen at Ohio State. but you still have to take some of it with a grain of salt because of the teams they played, which makes it hard to tell. And like, I'm going to actually go ahead and give, it's really hard to weight it just because you have like 3 first-round receivers. You have 2 potential first rounders on the offensive line. You have another couple guys that are probably going to go in the 3rd round on the offensive line. I mean, it's probably the best offensive line we've ever had, and that's including ones with Orlando Pace. So you have like an offensive line with multiple first rounders, receivers with 3 first rounders, a tight end who was going to go in the first couple of rounds. It's just like the most talented offensive group of skill guys that I've ever seen. And then, you have a quarterback who's able to get them the ball. But so Bryce Young is the leading contender for the Heisman right now, but he does lots of short passes and lets his playmakers do the work, or he just throws deep to Jameson Williams, the other guy who was the best receiver on Bama, who couldn't even get in the starting 3 at Ohio State, which is just insane about the depth. So I don't know how good Stroud is, or if it's just that he has like a best supporting cast I've ever seen around him, and it could be like the Cowboys, where, is Troy Aikman good, or is he just with, an unbelievable offensive line, tight end, receiver, and running back of all time. So like, but it doesn't mean that he wasn't also great. So I'm not sure how good he is because he has so many good people around him. It makes it tough.
It's probably safe to say he's pretty darn good, even though he does have all that talent. I would say, I mean, you can tell just by the way he passes, he's accurate. He has a lot of time to throw, granted, but they use him the right way too. I mean, the offensive coaches for Ohio State use the tools they have. They use the players they have. I think that's definitely in his favor. It's a quarterback friendly system, definitely, but that's not an excuse at all. I mean, that's not saying that he wouldn't be awesome if he went to Michigan. I mean, he would probably be like, he'd probably have half the stats he does at Michigan just because of the way they would use him incorrectly. But I think Ohio State, I think they're now with Travion Henderson. Oh my gosh, you have to be happy about that guy.
He's all right.
He's okay.
I don't ever get to see him because we blow people out and he gets benched in like the second quarter of every game. So like, I never get to see the guy.
Yeah.
That's the only thing. That's the one thing I was going to say about like Dwayne Haskins, why he was so much fun to watch, is because our defense was like the worst we've ever had at Ohio State when he was starting. So because of that, he got to play 4 quarters every game, and he got to put up some insane statistics. Whereas, now Henderson as a running back, you're going to get pulled even quicker. But because Stroud is still playing 3 quarters for most games, or at least 2.5, whereas Henderson's only playing 2 quarters, and he's done.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that now that Henderson has come on, that's just I don't know who's going to stop them, honestly.
I think he's the best back I've seen in Ohio State too, which is insane. I think he's the second best behind, he's the best, and the only person I thought was close was Clarett. I think Clarett has better vision than him, but Henderson just has better moves and better quickness, better top end speed. Yeah. He's just the full pack, the total package. It's an unbelievable player.
Yeah, I was watching. Excuse me. I was watching him like as far as like the recruiting, like before he got to Ohio State. I was comparing him and the running back that Michigan pulled out. Like they weren't too far apart. I mean, the running back, his name is escaping me, the freshman right now. He was like top 40 guy, and he looked really good right out of Michigan. But I was comparing him and Travion Henderson's like highlight films, and I was just, in my mind, I'm trying to make it the case that, oh yeah, our guy is just as good as Travion. And I was watching high school, and it's kind of hard to tell because those guys are just running wild anyway on those high school kids. But this year, our guy hasn't even like scratched the field. Like your Travion Henderson has jumped past 2 Ohio State running backs that were ahead of him in the beginning, and hasn't looked back.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people thought that Teague was going to get a good amount of playing time just because he had the most experience, but I think a lot of people were assuming Mayan might jump him because he did well in the postseason. at least against Clemson. And he just looked like the guy that's going to be really tough to bring down. And so he doesn't have like the top end speed that Henderson has, but he's really good, like for getting like the 7 to 10 yard runs. And his average is like one of the top in the country too. And he's the backup.
Yeah.
His yards per carry is ridiculous. It's like probably like 7.8, whereas Henderson is 9 or something ridiculous.
So we've talked a lot about the offense. So let's switch over to defense real quick.
Do we have
so
I was enjoying myself. Don't make me do it.
It looks like the Buckeyes have kind of, maybe they've turned a corner. I don't know. They've had some pretty bad competition, but I know the first couple games, and I'll go ahead and use the word shaky for them because they really did seem a little bit out of position, lost that safety. What was his name? Proctor?
Yeah, we lost Proctor.
Lost that guy. I mean, it was a little ugly. Even Tulsa did probably, they were more successful than you probably wanted them to be.
Yeah, the weird thing is, so like everyone was coming into the season thinking the defensive end was going to be the strength of the defense, and we're like, well, hey, we have Haskell in the middle, but we don't have like any proven depth really outside of him, and because we lost our stud defensive tackle from last year, and we were concerned about that, and then it turns out that like our defensive tackles are getting like all of our sacks on the team, which is insane. Like you don't ever see like the defensive tackles leading the team in sacks. I mean, I don't think I can ever remember a time where that happened. I mean, but the crazy thing is, so I think Zach Harrison might have been injured. Like he started off really good game one, kind of forced fumble, strip sack, and I don't remember if he returned it for a touchdown or not, but it was at least a forced fumble strip. And he was really quiet, really like for a few games after that, and I think he missed some time. And then I think the last game or two, he's finally starting to get pressure again. So if we can get him going along with our defensive tackles, we're going to be in really good shape. And the other thing that I'm happy about is, while we had a lot of injuries on the defensive line early on, we had multiple 5-star guys, Sawyer and JTT, getting a lot of playing time early. And they made some plays here and there, but most importantly, they're getting a lot of experience. So if you look at the stats of how much the linemen are playing, like it's almost equal. Like everyone's getting about 20 snaps a game, each of the linemen. So like the true freshmen are getting just as much playing time as the veterans, and that's going to pay huge dividends. Because like I was just talking to some people earlier about the difference between like in Ohio State or Michigan and some of the other schools, like let's say Maryland and Iowa, even Iowa. Like at the beginning of the year, like they were both looking really good. Iowa loses an elite corner, and then their defense just completely falls apart. Maryland loses, granted, more than just one corner. They lost multiple corners and a receiver, and then their whole team fell apart. But a lot of these teams, they can do well as long as their starters are healthy. Whereas, like, I feel like the depth on our team is just absurd. Like I could put our starting receivers, all 3 of them, on the bench, and then we would put in a bunch of guys, and then the 3 top backups I think would be almost as good as the 3 first rounders, which is insane.
It'll be interesting, to see how the defense develops over. Hey, people walk through. It's okay. Hi. Can I get a go blue? Oh, too funny. Someone looks tired. It's a school night. Yeah. So, I mean, Michigan's defense, Mike McDonald, he's come in and turned around the defense from last year. And I'm super happy about that. That he's like one of the bright spots on this team right now, in this coaching staff.
Where did he come from?
He came from the Baltimore Ravens. He was like he was an assistant coach, like the linebackers coach for the Ravens. So Harbaugh's brother sent him over, basically, made him the defensive coordinator, and they've just really been competent and pretty dominant. So too, but yeah, and so I'm happy about the defense right now. Like we're pretty good. I feel like when Michigan plays Ohio State, like we may not get blown out. Like that's kind of how I feel. Like I mean, I think it may still be a high scoring game and they'll score their points, but I don't feel like our DBs or our team, our defense as a whole is going to be as like destroyed as they were in the past. So I'm interested to see how, like, if that, what I'm saying is correct, but they're competent now. So I'm really kind of optimistic about that. Not necessarily the offense, that's a different story, but the defense might actually keep us in the game for a while.
I have two comments. Number one, our weak link is right now our linebackers, and it's because I'm gonna go ahead and blame Al Washington since he's a former Michigan coach. You know, anyone who was coaching over there, we should have not taken. I think that was a poor decision on Day's part getting him.
Losing him, by the way.
Yeah, God, he's just, our linebackers have just been, they've been a weak link for so long. I mean, they were the veterans last year, but you know, we had a couple that were pretty good, and you know, always Tough Borland, who was just not meant to play against spread defenses anymore. But God, the linebackers are just so awful. They're just the teams that are going to give us problems are going to be teams that can run the ball well and have a passing game with like the tight ends involved, basically. So our corners are surprisingly good. We have one good safety. I think the second safety has some potential issues, but we have a lot of good young guys that are getting some experience. So I'll be interested to see how that turns out. But I'm definitely worried about. So like I think the blueprint. I think Michigan would have a decent chance if they can get slightly better quarterback play, because the blueprint for beating us is going to be to play keep away with a good running game, which you have, keeping us off the field, making sure you score in the red zone, and then just making a few disruptive plays on defense. And you have, you know, an elite linebacker, an elite defensive end, and an elite cornerback. So you have the potential to make some big, you know, a few big disruptive plays, pick six or force fumble, something like that. You know, and then playing at home is going to help. So there's definitely potential for that game to go your way.
So what's happening with Kerry Coombs? Coombs, pronounce that right.
So after
he got pulled, right?
So what happened was, so he was calling plays for the defense, and after they lost to Oregon, he still has his title, but he was moved from, he was calling plays on the sideline, and then now he's up in the booth, helping to coordinate and relay information down. But Matt Barnes is now calling plays. So
I remember seeing like the announcers on one game said some other guy is calling plays, and he was just like this guy in the corner. Like, never heard of him. It was like they almost pulled someone out of the stands and said, "Hey, call some plays for us." Kerry Coombs is making, I just looked it up, 1.4 million per year. He's like the highest paid assistant coach right now.
So
and
the thing is,
just lost his play calling ability.
He's worth it. He's worth that money just because of how good he is at coaching DBs and
It's a lot of money
and recruiting DBs. For those two things alone, he's worth it, even if he doesn't call plays. Because he's the best. He's the best DB coach we've ever had.
Yeah.
And best defensive back recruiter we've ever had. The reason why our defenses have been trashed the last few years is because he went to the NFL, and the 2 years that he was gone, the guys that replaced him couldn't coach and couldn't recruit. So the only people that are playing well on our secondary are the people that he recruited that are true freshmen, because all the other people are trash.
Yeah. All right, let's flip to the last subject. So that's this coming up, the game's coming up this weekend. So Michigan plays Michigan State, Ohio State plays Penn State. What do you see happening when Ohio State plays Penn State this weekend?
Pain for Clifford. That guy's he's not gonna finish the game. I don't know why he was even playing in the last game. If they were smart, they would have let him rest so he could potentially, I mean, their season is over if he can't play. Now, I've heard conflicting reports that he's actually healthy now, but I don't know how the guy that we saw in last week's game could possibly be healthy this week after, you know, just a week of rest. When he's healthy, like at the beginning of the year, he looked really good, like a completely different quarterback. You know, and they obviously have in Deshaun, in what's his name, the receiver that's really good, the Dotson or something. Is that his name? He is, one of the best in the country. So that's like pretty much their whole offense. They might have a decent tight end. Their offensive line apparently is trash. Their running game is trash. And they allegedly have a good defense, but they did let Illinois run. Now, see, this is a little tricky because I don't know if anyone else has run on them. I know their defensive stats, especially in the secondary, are elite. Like they have really good corners or a good corner and a good safety. And I'm thinking that, like, basically Illinois was putting 8 offensive linemen out there, and they were running, and Penn State was just not adjusting from the 4-3 defense that they normally run. Like they wouldn't put extra defensive linemen out there to deal with all the offensive linemen. They're like, oh, we'll just try to stop the running game like that. So I don't know if that's a good comparison because Ohio State's probably not going to be doing that. They're going to run their offense, and maybe they should try to run a few plays like Illinois did because that obviously worked. But I think that our offense is going to be effective. I don't think we're going to be passing as much this week, though. I think they're going to really rely heavily on the run game because I think that's Penn State's weakness. It's a lot safer. I think maybe after we get a lead going, we might take some more shots. But I think that the safe pick is to go heavy on the running game, and then what are they going to be able to do? I think our defense is going to probably score at least a touchdown. This last week, we had scored defensive touchdowns in 4 straight games until last week against Indiana. So I think we're going to get at least one more. We always get pick sixes against Penn State. So that's going to happen again. I'm thinking we're going to at least win by 3 scores, probably more than that. I just don't think that they're going to be able to get anything going on offense.
So logic would tell me that too. I would think that Penn State's going to get rolled in this game, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say it might be a little bit closer than we think. The only reason,
based on what?
Based on me just wanting that to happen, mainly about 90%. But there's also a small part of me that thinks that the Penn State we saw earlier in the year hasn't gone away. They would have beaten Iowa. We know that if Clifford had not gotten hurt, they would have beaten Iowa. And so up until they laid that egg against Illinois last week, I thought Penn State was probably the second best team in the Big Ten. And I don't think they are now anymore. But I have this feeling that Clifford is probably going to play better this week. There may have been some looking forward to Ohio State, completely negate, they know Illinois. Illinois is probably the worst team in the Big Ten. I think maybe Northwestern actually has that title right now, but Illinois is number 2 worst. And so I think they really overlooked them, and they've still got Dotson. They've still got Clifford. They've still got a talented running back, even though they haven't shown that. And when they go to Ohio State, granted, that's going to be a tough, I don't think they're going to win. I'm not saying Penn State's going to win. I think they're going to have some success because Ohio State hasn't seen a team that has even close to the similar amount of talent that they have in like 4 games. So I think that, and maybe it'll just be in the beginning that Penn State, shows up and maybe at the end, Ohio State will pull away. I just don't think because after I saw what happened against Illinois, I thought, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Like Ohio State just lost game day because Penn State decided to just lay an egg, and now they're going to the Michigan State game. So we'll see. I'm going to predict 45-38. That's what I'm going to say. Ohio State wins 45-38.
So you think Gimpy quarterback and all, they're going to be able to score 38 points somehow?
45-38.
So you think he's like all healed up now and it's going to be like the same Clifford as he was earlier in the year?
I think he's totally healed up. What is your score prediction? We need to hear it officially.
Oh, let me think. I'm thinking like 42-10 or something.
42-10. Oh, wow. Okay. Interesting. Well, it's on the record now, so we'll come back and see. So thoughts on Michigan State?
Let's see. So statistically, it's really even. like their common opponents. They've had 3 common opponents, and the total score is like off by like a couple points, so it's almost identical. And the only real difference, in my opinion, is the fact that they're more balanced on offense than you guys are. They have a more playmaking at the quarterback and receiver position, and one of the better running backs in the country. Though they have 1 elite running back versus 2, but their 1 is really good. And I just think logically it would make sense that their quarterback and their running back, or their quarterback and receiver that you guys don't seem to have, should give them an edge because they have more variety in their offense, and it would be harder to shut it down. Which is why I think that they're going to win a close game. I think it's going to be really close and really low scoring because both teams are just going to be, trying to run. And I don't know, like you guys were struggling to run against Rutgers, so I don't know how you guys are going to run against them.
Right, very true. And against Rutgers, but if you remember, the very next week, Michigan went to Wisconsin and won 38-14. So when McNamara couldn't pass, Michigan couldn't run against Rutgers. The very next week, they went to Wisconsin and put up 38 at Wisconsin. So I almost feel like Harbaugh and the team, they play down to their competition to a certain degree. And there's might be a little bit of possum being played with Michigan and with Northwestern this past week. Like they just didn't do anything offensively through the air. McNamara had no touchdowns, but you've played 7 games and you only have 5 touchdowns. Obviously, there's going to be some games you didn't throw any touchdowns, but I think it's going to be a close game because they are pretty evenly matched. Unfortunately, I think Michigan's going to pull it out, maybe like a let's say 28-24, maybe something like that, 27-24, something like that. And I think Michigan will pull it out because of their defense. And I think that Michigan will be able to run the ball on Michigan State's defense better than Michigan State will be able to run the ball and move the ball overall on Michigan's defense. So I think that's probably the difference in the game. And I think that they are holding back a little bit in Michigan's offense. So, excuse me. So one terrible thing about this Michigan State game is it's a must win for Harbaugh. It's a 100% must win because right now he is tied. He's 3-3 with Michigan State over his 6 years. Last year, he became tied with Michigan State in the records. So if they lose to Michigan State this weekend, Harbaugh will have a losing record against Michigan State. And I think that is probably more unacceptable to a Michigan fan than losing to Ohio State, because Ohio State is good, right? Like they're really good. If you lose to them, it's terrible, it's painful, but losing to Michigan State is demoralizing. And like go cut myself, demoralizing. Like it's just awful. I mean, last year was awful, but I think that Harbaugh is maybe playing for his job in this specific game, if at all. Like I have a theory though that Harbaugh is actually just auditioning for the NFL this year, which is why we see him reverting back to his San Francisco ways, the offense that they're running right now. I think that he is just auditioning for the NFL so that he can have a good record, won't beat Ohio State, but he'll have this record that he can be proud of a little bit and get a job with the NFL and go back out west somewhere. So that's kind of my prediction of what's happening with Michigan and Harbaugh right now, but he can't lose this game. This will affect his NFL career after this year if he loses this game. And
so,
yeah.
So you think that the NFL is a running league now?
No, but it's definitely a lot more conducive to Harbaugh and his method of football than college is. Like they're not playing modern college football in Michigan right now. I mean, obviously, it's winning right now. They're winning, but and it sounds like I'm complaining about their winning, but at the same time, you can kind of see the storm coming of the good teams that they're going to have to play in the last half, and their offense, unless they're playing really big possum, they're not going to be able to make it. So, yeah, it's kind of what I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say with all these teams. Like, I mean, I just can't tell. Like, it seems like you guys have been more overall impressive, I think, in most of your wins than Michigan State has. Though, like, they've won games. I think they've had more closer games. It seems like to me that they had no business having some of these close games against bad teams, but yet here they are. And I don't know, maybe there's just no great teams. That's why I keep coming back to. I just don't think that there's. I mean, even Ohio State is great on offense. Georgia's great on defense. Alabama's good on offense. Even their defense is pretty bad by their standards. It's like 40th or something.
Very true.
Not a lot of good teams this year. It makes it for an exciting playoff because we might actually have some new blood this year.
Yeah. We'll have to, maybe our next conversation, we'll have to start talking about the playoff. Because I think the first college football playoff ranking comes out after this weekend, right?
Yep, that's right.
We'll have to make that a segment on our next show for sure.
Rankings reaction.
Exactly. All right.
Definitely.
Well, let's wrap this up for tonight.
All right, go Bucks, screw blue.
Go blue.